Okay, welcome everybody to the regular business meeting for the District of Squamish for Tuesday, April 1st. Holland Squalin, Clis Tuktamut, plus Squamish Okmeo. As always, we're gathered to do our work today on the traditional and unceded territory of the Squamish Nation. Please be advised that this council meeting is being live streamed, recorded, and will be available to the public to view on the District of Squamish website following the meeting. If you have concerns, please notify the corporate officer present at the meeting. In this case, it would be Sarah Morris. Could I have someone move adoption of the agenda, please? Moved by Councillor French, second by Councillor Greenlaw. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Oh, I just wanted to point out to folks in the room that we've got Councillor Stoner joining us remotely today. Thank you, Councillor Stoner. Could we just do a quick check to make, you waved, so I'm going to assume that you can hear me. I just want to check audio coming the other way.
Yeah, I can hear you just fine. Thanks. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you for that. We can hear you loud and clear here. So first up, we have under delegations and invited presentations, we have a presentation. I believe we have Ms. Barnard joining us remotely to speak to Melanoma and Skin Cancer Awareness Month. So I will turn the floor over to you. You have 5 minutes to address council. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Your Worship and Council, for having me and proclaiming May to be Melanoma and Skin Cancer Awareness Month. My name is Kathy Barnard, and I'm actually the founder of the Save Your Skin Foundation, founded in North Vancouver, just down the road from you. Skin cancer is the most common of all cancers. 1 in 6 Canadians born in the 1990s will get skin cancer in their lifetime. There are more new cases of skin cancer each year than the number of breast, prostate, lung, and colon cancer combined. I know that firsthand. I was diagnosed in 2003 with the deadliest form of skin cancer, melanoma. And by 2005, it had spread to my liver, my lungs, my adrenal gland, my bones, and my kidney. I was given 6 months to live. I never would have thought that my days as a child at the local lakes, down at the beach, or all of my days on a softball diamond would have turned so deadly. Melanoma is now the 7th most common cancer in Canada and the 4th most common among people 15 to 29 years old. It is one of the few cancers with incident rates on the rise among Canadians. Exposure to UV radiation through exposure to sunlight, tanning beds, and sun lamps appears to be still the major risk factor for melanoma. Your skin is the largest organ of your body, and it's the one organ that we can see or our loved ones can see. Early detection and prevention is key to this type of cancer. Though no cancer, including melanoma, can ever be prevented with 100% certainty. But the good news with melanoma is that the risk factors are well known, so steps can be taken to dramatically reduce your risk of developing this deadly disease. So I wanted to leave you with a few tips. Always have sunscreen with you so that you can apply it whenever an unplanned outdoor activity arises. Use a sunscreen with an SPF of at least 30 whenever you are outdoors, even on those gray British Columbia days. Seek out shade when the UV index is high. Wear protective clothing with long sleeves, hats, and sunglasses. And check for changes in your moles, new moles, and see your doctor immediately if anything looks suspicious. Try to limit the sun exposure between 10 and 4. Please don't use a tanning bed, and get a cancer-related checkup by a doctor, including skin exams every 3 years between the ages of 20 and 40, and annually for those 40 and older. If you see something suspicious, please see your doctors immediately. But what can you do for your community? I'd love it if you would even consider incorporating a sun safety through environmental design program, which involves considering sun safety measures when constructing any new structures, parks, or sports venues in your community. You can also contact me at info@Save Your Skin Foundation if you'd like to participate in our free sunscreen dispenser pilot program this summer. We have them all across Canada, excited to say. And I'll tell you just a little bit about Save Your Skin Foundation. We are a patient-led, not-for-profit founded by my family and I in 2006 here in British Columbia. We are dedicated to fighting non-melanoma skin cancers, melanoma, and ocular melanoma through education, advocacy, and awareness initiatives across Canada. We provide a community of support for oncology patients and caregivers throughout the entire continuum of care, from prevention and diagnosis to survivorship. We are the leading melanoma organization in Canada, and we collaborate with other patient organizations in Canada and across the globe. There's a little bit of a Squamish connection. If you take a look when you get a chance at my website, saveyourskin.ca, and take a look at my logo, that is my actual hand. You can see my broken baseball pinkies if you look nice and close. That logo was actually created by a lovely couple that live in Squamish, and they built that as a legacy to me, who used to be their neighbor. So once again, I can't thank you enough for proclaiming May as Melanoma Awareness Month and for really helping us raise awareness about this type of cancer. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your work on this and for your presentation here today. Council, do we have any questions for our guests? And the ask, just to remind everyone, is to proclaim May Skin Cancer Awareness Month. Be proclaimed Melanoma and Skin Cancer Awareness Month in the District of Squamish is the request. So I'll entertain questions if there are any. Otherwise, if someone's ready to move the proclamation request. Councillor Anderson.
I'm happy to move the proclamation request, Mayor Herford.
Okay, is there a seconder? Second by Councillor Hamilton. Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Anderson.
Yes, I'd just like to make the comment that I really appreciate Ms. Barnard's drawing our attention to the fact that, well, we as a district of Squamish are involved in a number of facilities, outdoor recreation facilities included, and quite a number of outdoor events. And I think it really is something that we should take responsibility for, is to take part in this spreading awareness of skin cancer at those facilities and during those events. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate this. For whatever reason, this topic really resonates for me. I'm quite terrified of the sun in the summer and appreciate when council meetings are scheduled such that I don't have to wear sunscreen, which I don't like, but I can still ride my bike. And so, late meetings and early starts aren't necessarily a problem. But I really like which I hadn't thought so much about our design and how we're designing for shade and so on. I always look for shade. I know it's not a substitute for sunscreen, but I'm always looking where can I stand and have a little bit of a shelter from the sun. And so it's something really good, I think, to keep in our minds as we're looking at new developments.
Yeah, thank you. Other comments here? Speaking in support of the motion, and thank you for bringing this forward. I think that often we're so or maybe it's just me. We get so sort of reined in the winter that as soon as the sun comes out, it's like maybe an overcorrection and just running towards those spaces. And it's a perfectly timed reminder to that there's risks involved and what we can do to, I guess, mitigate those risks, as well as to ensure that we're checking in with our medical professionals as to our own health. So thank you very much for that. And I'm happy to vote in support of this proclamation. Seeing no other hands, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously, as it should. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Good
all.
work so far. Thank you. So next, we have another proclamation request. The topic is GBS and CIPD Awareness Month, and it's my pleasure to welcome Corinne Lonsdale to address council. There you go.
Thank you, Mayor Herford, councillors. Here I am again. And so today I actually want to talk about the awareness more than anything. I've given you a fair amount of information over there. CIDP and GBS are both autoimmune disorders, and where they both diseases attack nervous systems. And there's many variants which you see on your pamphlet that I have given you. There's 2 or 3 of them mentioned there. Robbie actually has one of the rarest variants of CIDP. More than, I think he said 2 or 3 million people have the variant he has. CIDP and GBS are both very hard to diagnose. And once they are, they're not always easy to treat, because they're rare. So the foundation is extremely important for many reasons. And so first, I'm going to tell you, the foundation became most important for my son when he was in the hospital shortly after he was diagnosed. I was made aware of the foundation by a cousin of mine who said, oh, I know there's a foundation that addresses this disorder. And so I contacted them, and they contacted me, and they asked, did I think Rob would benefit from a visit from someone who also had CIDP? And yes, because it's very frightening for the patients and their family when they're diagnosed. No, chances are none of you know anybody with CIDP. And they, certainly the patients, they don't know anybody either, and they're scared stiff, and so is their family. So it was really, really beneficial to have somebody who'd had it for several years come and visit and talk to him about it. He's become more involved with the foundation as well. The foundation does reach out to all of its patients and enables them, in fact, to join in on Zoom conferences. 4 times a year, they have meetings with their patients via Zoom, so where they can interact with one another and share some of the ways they are able to tackle some of their deficiencies. And that's been very, very important and helpful to Rob as a resource. They certainly do put a lot of their time into fundraising, to research, to advocacy. It just goes on. They're just a really valuable tool for anybody with the affliction. Or it's not a disease, it's a disorder. But what I wanted to say, and I was, taking up your time here, but I'm telling you, after last year coming here, I met somebody else whose husband has CIDP in Squamish, because she'd seen me with this presentation and she approached me. So the awareness is important because of the privacy laws in this country. You just can't say, doctors, nobody can tell people, give names out to the foundation of anybody they know who might benefit. So I think it's always by word of mouth almost that the word gets out. And this obviously is a tool, being able to come in front of you. So thank you. And so on that note, I would ask that council would declare the month of May GBS CIDP Awareness Month in the District of Squamish. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your submission. Council, do you have any questions for our guest, or we have a proclamation request before us as well? Go ahead, Councillor Penigo.
Just like to move the proclamation, and I'll speak to it if seconded.
Okay, Councillor French seconds. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the proclamation. Just as you were speaking, two things jumped out at me, not specifically about CIDP or MMN, but the one aspect is the importance of some of the accessibility work we've done in our community. And I can see how that is really important for a lot of people. I think as a community, it's not an area where we have focused a lot or probably enough. And hopefully we're starting to do some reasonable catch up there. The other piece that jumped out at me is the importance of community. And I hadn't really thought about our ability for people to do proclamations as something that could help support that. But I'm glad we could do that. And I think it really does, not just in this case, but in so many cases, making sure that we are supporting people to build community within our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor French.
Thanks, Mayor Herford. And I'll pick up on Councillor Penningill's final thought there. It's really pleasing to hear that connection was made, because, sometimes when these proclamations come in front of us, my thought is that is just so frivolous and what a waste of time. It is not. Clearly, it is not. When connections like that are made through a simple proclamation like this on our agenda, that story makes 6 years worth of these proclamations worth it for me. So thanks for sharing that.
Thank you, Councillor French. Any other comments on this? Just happy to support, and as we just heard from my colleague, the feedback that these have impact direct is very helpful. So thank you for that, and thank you for your work on this to keep to raise the awareness, and as Councillor Pettingill said, to strive to create community inside our community. So I think that's really commendable, and happy to support. So with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much. So next we have on the agenda is unscheduled public attendance. If anyone has a matter that's emergent in nature or needs to be addressed prior to the next council meeting, now would be your opportunity to come forward. Seeing no one, we'll move along. We don't have any public hearings this evening, but we do have a consent agenda. Would anyone like to pull anything from the consent agenda? Councillor Pettingill?
I would like to pull the committee of the whole and advisory body recommendations. I don't know, am I able to pull just one, or do I have to pull the whole set? I
will go to our corporate officer on that.
Thank you. Sarah Morris, Deputy Corporate Officer for the District of Squamish. Through the chair, council may pull individual motions for consideration. In this case, I'd suggest potentially pulling the batch if there are multiple recommendations under a specific heading.
Yeah, so I was just interested in 6EI.
So everything associated with that paid parking topic?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, we'll deal with that in its appropriate place on the agenda, which I believe is 11C, but we'll deal with that when we get there. Is there anyone else who would like to pull anything from the consent agenda? And if not, I'll move the consent agenda. Councillor French seconds. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So, and like I said, we'll come back to that topic later in the discussion. And now we're moving on to 7A, which is oceanfront Marine Center amendments. And I will pass it over to staff to introduce themselves and run us through the presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Jessie Fletcher, Manager of Current Planning, and with me this evening is Jonas Vilniškis, Senior Director of Community Development. I'm here tonight to present 3 bylaws for consideration of first and second reading for the mixed-use project on the Oceanfront Peninsula. This project was first introduced at the November 26th Committee of the Whole meeting. To support the proposed project, 3 bylaws require amending. These are on the screen with their parent bylaw underlined to try and contextualize the amendments some more. An amendment to the sub-area plan, which resides in the official community plan, is necessary to change the overall use and intent of this parcel. The zoning and amenities for the oceanfront sub-area are contained within a phased development agreement. This requires amending to update the zoning and deliver the amenities related to the overall site. Finally, the District of Squamish zoning bylaw requires amending to update the zoning for the site. The location of the proposal is on the Squamish Oceanfront Peninsula. The peninsula is covered by the sub-area plan and appendix to the OCP on the top left of the slide. You'll note on the image to the top right, the extent of the Squamish Oceanfront that is zoned in alignment with the sub-area plan. The subject proposal is located in Block C and partially in Block I, as shown on the lower middle image highlighted in bright blue. This slide highlights the subject property in the greater context of approvals on the Oceanfront Peninsula. This image shows all of the approved DPs, some of which have been constructed, others which still await issuance. The waterfront employment block, known in the zone as Block C, is within the sub-area plan as waterfront employment. It is located on the northwest portion of the peninsula along the Cattermole Slough, located north of Spockwas Feather Park, south of Carbon Engineering, and to the west of both Residential 1 and Office 1 to approved development permits. The application is designated oceanfront within the official community plan, with the majority of the project site designated waterfront employment. The southernmost part of the site is designated civic use. The site is split zoned Area C and Area I in the CD 69 zone. Development permit areas 1, 2, 11, and 13 would apply to any proposed development. The applicant proposes to amend the sub-area plan and CD 69 zone to permit a mixed-use district, which would include 207 rental units, 20% of which would be 3-bedroom units, all of which would be secured as rental tenure in the zone and with a housing agreement, and located above light industrial uses. 20% of these would be adaptable. And they are proposing a layout of 5 buildings with above ground and below grade parking. The applicant is proposing to amend the employment use from marine employment and marine accessory uses to light industrial uses more generally. For Block I, which is Building F on this slide, the applicant proposes a childcare use and a public art use, which would include securing 390 square meters as childcare space and dedicating 98 square meters to Squamish Arts at a $1 lease rate plus triple net for a minimum term of 25 years. The oceanfront's parking standards are currently the same as those that apply outside of the downtown. The applicant is proposing to lower their parking ratio for this lot specifically, given the rental tenure. This ratio would still be higher than the downtown rate of 1 stall per unit, but slightly lower than the community-wide ratio. Staff note that the parking ratio proposed at the committee meeting was slightly higher than this and consistent with the waterfront landing ratio. The applicant has revised a slightly lower ratio after completing a more detailed analysis. The ratio for employment uses would remain the same. The applicant intends to share parking throughout uses utilizing the shared parking mechanism within the zoning bylaw. They will also provide a shared parking strategy prior to DP issuance. The required parking means that a minimum of 11 service stalls will be required, accommodating overheight vehicles for residents. Bike parking exceeds the bylaw and will be secured in the zoning. This application does not trigger the community amenity contribution policy, as the only residential use proposed is rental. Given that an OCP amendment is triggered, the applicant is proposing to also construct 390 square meters of childcare space, lease 98 square meters to Squamish Arts for a period of 25 years. Both of these items would need to be delivered prior to the construction of the 120th residential unit, and then of course the 207 units of rental housing. These slides are meant to summarize the applicant's response at a high level to some of the comments received at the Committee of the Whole meeting in November. The applicant has refined their parking ratio and further studied how best to allocate overheight stalls to residents. A minimum of 11 spaces will need to be provided at grade based on a review of available parking on site. Given the uncertainty of final tenancies and continued review of the building orientation, the applicant has committed to providing a parking management strategy at development permit. The applicant has chosen to remove the indoor climbing facility and will look elsewhere on the oceanfront to site it at a future date. The applicant has provided an employment density analysis, which staff will speak to momentarily and which is attached to your report this evening as attachment 4. The applicant has also removed the employment restriction on rental housing and has agreed to add a policy addendum to the housing agreement to prioritize local workforce first, but this would avoid penalizing employees if they could no longer work or lost their local employment. The applicant has provided more detail about the art space amenity, which has been detailed and is supported by Squamish Arts, who have provided a letter of support that was included in your report package this evening. The applicant has expanded their no gas covenant to all residential units on the peninsula. The applicant has committed that 20% of the units will be adaptable. And finally, the applicant confirms that they are providing a minimum of 10 square meters per unit of open space on the rooftop terrace, meeting the bylaw requirement. The sub-area plan contemplated a marine employment use at this location. The sub-area plan cites uses such as boat building, sales and leasing and repair, maritime-related uses, community arts facilities, duty-free export, a boat launch, cruise ship terminals, marinas, and above ground floor residential that is compatible with light industrial uses. During the master planning process and development of the Cattermole shoreline with carbon engineering, it has become apparent that the area is insufficiently deep or wide to accommodate a boat launch. This is further exacerbated by the fact that the flood construction level accounts for sea level rise and raises the land significantly as it relates to the high water mark. The original plan had anticipated that any flood protection works would not apply to this type of use. The sub-area plan did anticipate that the amount of land provided for this use may exceed the demand. The sub-area plan had contemplated an expansion of non-marine related light industrial uses in this location. At the committee meeting, council directed the applicant to complete an employment analysis. Working with district data, senior planning staff, the applicant provided a comparative analysis of the two use proposals, highlighting the boat ramp as drawn is not feasible. Excuse me. The analysis indicated that the existing zoning may provide employment for up to 64 employees, inclusive of the childcare space. The proposed zoning would create up to 153 jobs. Several clauses are being added to the phase development agreement. The phase development agreement bylaw seeks to stipulate that only renewable energy can be used for all residential units. That Lot O is secured as residential rental tenure with the number of 3 and 2 bedroom and adaptable units secured. The applicant has also agreed to add a clause that would ensure all future leaseholders are aware of potential conflicts with industrial uses. It secures the art space and childcare space, securing the delivery of these amenities to the 120th residential unit. They have committed to a statutory right-of-way through the site for public access as per this sub-area plan, provision of a parking management plan prior to the development permit issuance, and 2 educational signs along the Cattermole Slough. Finally, the phase development agreement updates its own zoning bylaw. Some changes are also proposed to the sub-area plan. Primarily, the waterfront employment area is being revised to reflect the change in use, while language is proposed to allow any rezoning considering affordable or rental housing to bypass a sub-area plan amendment if it is determined that there's adequate infrastructure on site. Finally, the sub-area plan is being updated to recognize the official names of Squamish Feather Park and the Squamish Trail. The application is not currently in alignment with the OCP, so a public hearing is required. A public hearing is also required for the OCP and the phase development agreement bylaws as per legislation. If the application receives first and second reading today, staff will proceed with normal procedures for public hearing notification, including 2 notices in the paper and a mail out to property owners within 100 meters of the site. A public hearing is currently tentatively scheduled for May 6th pending council decision. A sign was posted to the site as per district policy. No comments or requests for a public information meeting have been received to date. Staff referred the application to Squamish Nation as it is an OCP amendment. The nation is supportive of the application. Both Squamish Arts and Enchikai, Squamish Nation's economic development arm, have provided letters of support for the application. The table on your screen highlights the housing targets for 2025 based on the 2023 Housing Needs Report, Interim Housing Needs Report, and the CMHC Housing Accelerator Fund commitments, and the proportion of these targets this proposal represents. Generally, the proposal is aligned with the OCP, and the Housing Needs Report does emphasize the importance of building both rental stock and 3-bedroom units, for which this application does. So there are 6 motions on the screen. The first 3 relate to the official community plan and the required engagement as per the legislation. And then the number 4, 5, and 6 are staff recommend first and second reading of the OCP amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and phase development agreement amendment. Thank you. I will take any questions now.
Thank you for that. Council, questions about what we've heard so far? I'll start with Councillor Pettingill and Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, the first one on page 90 of our package, which I think is page 8 of the report, I still see climbing gym referenced, I think in relation to parking requirements. Is that something that should be removed, or are we still permitting a climbing gym? They just don't plan to have one, or?
Through the mayor, could you clarify if that's in the staff report or a different portion of the package?
It's on page 90 of 479 of our package, which looks like it's page 8. It looks like it's the change track version of the zoning bylaw.
And it has section 40 MMM.12 off-street parking subset F. There's a table. That's the description, yeah.
Through the mayor, if it's in the track changes, then that's not the final version of the bylaw, and that would be a staff mistake. But I don't believe it's in the final zoning, and it wouldn't commit them to an indoor climbing facility at this time. It would just be an explanation of the requirement if it's related to parking.
Okay, thank you. And around the the worker housing and the policy change, can you explain to me then, because I think I heard, when someone, it sounds like it will be someone's policy when someone's first applying to give it to someone who works downtown, but after that, it's no longer a requirement. And so I'm not clear on who owns this policy, who monitors it, who implements it. Can you clarify that piece?
Thank you. Through the mayor, that is it would live with the leasing party, so the owner of the units at this point. The intent with the developer as they were developing this project was to primarily target local employees who work on the oceanfront or within the downtown. Council raised concerns with that, so having it as a policy to prioritize that when filling vacancies within the rental units keeps that intent without penalizing a tenant who may lose their employment or who may no longer be able to work. So they felt that it was a good way to fit both the intent of the units and council's concerns.
And was there any discussion about, I can see maybe the day after you lose your job, you don't want to lose your housing, but if turns out you're commuting to the city for 10 years, maybe that's also not what we want to support. So was there any discussion about a middle ground in there somewhere?
Through the mayor, there was no discussion of a middle ground at this time. Through the ability of us to regulate a housing agreement, what our abilities are, there isn't one that we are aware of that would be easy to both implement and monitor over time.
Okay. And then the last one for now, I think, there's a reference to the original, I can't remember what the exact wording is, but it seemed to imply there was no secured rental in the original or where we stand now. And maybe this has already changed, but my understanding was there was some expectation of nightly rentals or permission of that. Is that no longer a thing, or where does that sort of fit in what's there in the oceanfront more broadly?
Thank you to the mayor. So first, it's correct that in the original oceanfront phase development agreement, sub-area plan, and zoning bylaw, there were no rental housing or affordable housing units secured. There were short-term rentals envisioned, and there is policy within the zoning bylaw and the phase development agreement supporting that. They would be subject to our business license bylaw, however, if they were to pursue any short-term rentals on the site.
Sorry, just on this point, because this is on my list, so that licensing piece sort of supersedes the zoning, or there needs to be alignment of both those things to, maybe it's another way to phrase that, to achieve a nightly rental here?
Through the mayor, so if I can, yes. So I'm going to try to start a little bit higher level there. The phase development agreement does secure the zoning and the subdivision development control bylaw on the site. So the zoning, they would have to agree to any change that was made. And if this does receive first and second reading, they'll have to submit a Schedule G, which is in the bylaw that says we are okay with any zoning changes. They are still subject to our business license bylaw or building bylaw, any bylaw that was not secured in that. So yes, they would still need to license any short-term rental in accordance with any other bylaw that speaks to it.
Okay, I'm going to mull that over for now. Other questions on this? Is that you, Councillor French? Yeah, and then Councillor Anderson after.
Thanks, Mayor Herford. I'm noting in the staff report that in amongst all the details around parking, there's no reference to accessible parking spaces. And I suspect that might be because that comes later in the process. So could you just address that and let me know if I'm correct in that?
Through the mayor, you are correct. That would be daylighted through the development permit process if the application was successful.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. Two questions arise for me from the package provided by the Together Architects Studio package. Firstly, we know that the oceanfront peninsula is a very windy place. The old strategy was to plant Sitka spruce around the edges of downtown parks. But what I see here is a potential situation of wind tunnel effects. The alignment of the buildings, that street that we're looking at, that corridor, is not susceptible to wind an uncomfortable wind at certain times of the year or times of day. I wonder if any consideration to your knowledge has been given to this either by the advisory design panel or by the development proponent.
Thank you for that question. Through the mayor, the applicant, the developer of the site has done quite a few studies on wind tunneling and the effects of buildings on wind. For this site specifically, in the design of the buildings, I'm not aware of what work has gone into it. However, generally they're working on their understanding that as the site grades up, it does change the direction of the wind. And you will notice at higher elevations around the presentation center, in some areas, the wind speed does slow. But they are taking that into account as they design the buildings, but something that we typically discuss at development permit.
Thank you. My second question that arises for me from the same package concerns the level 1 industrial spaces. And we are given a total quantum of the amount. I think that is, I wrote it down somewhere, but it seems to me that we should also be concerned with giving a more nuanced perspective on the diverse types and typologies of industrial space that are being provided and that we are encouraging developers to provide. And I wonder if you might be able to elaborate on a little bit on the number and average size of units. What is the vision the developer has for the types of enterprise that could locate in these? Is there flex spaces that could move between 1,000 and 2,000 or 3,000 square feet? Is the design of the buildings would it allow that type of flexibility? I guess I'm concerned that from a community perspective, we have been concerned about what we're providing in light industrial space. And in fact, just 2 weeks ago, we discussed the Pioneer Way temporary use permit application where this issue comes up. In that case, we were informed by the commercial realtor that these types of spaces are not in real demand from some perspective. Can you elaborate on the types of spaces and the outlook of the developer on what might fill them?
Through the mayor, thank you for that question. And I will hazard a bit of a guess here. We haven't spoken with the developer about the exact number of units they're proposing. There is some flexibility to change the units. And again, with mezzanines being enclosed, unenclosed, there are some options there. The uses here are intended to be more flexible than what they are in the park. And staff have heard both accounts that light industrial space is in high demand and that it's not in high demand. So I can't speak to that specifically. Staff have heard both things, but in terms of a detailed plan, I believe the developer is waiting till they get further along in the process to seek out potential tenants and opportunities for different sizes of units.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Stoner.
Thank you, through the chair. Thanks to staff for the presentation. My first question is with respect to the proposed changes for the sub-area plan language that would allow for additional residential density, either affordable or rental, with a few conditions. And one of those conditions is additional generated on-street traffic can be accommodated. And I'm just curious, is that accommodated within the site, or does it extend to accommodation accessing the site at any pinch points from the downtown entrance? I just recognize that the growth of the sub-area plan has been quite substantive since it was first adopted back in whenever that was. Initially, it was 2,500 to 3,000 residents, and now we're talking about 6,500 residents. So I'm curious what do we mean by that condition?
Thank you, through the mayor. This would be at the discretion of the district engineer. And at this time, any additional growth on the oceanfront beyond what's proposed here today would require a fulsome traffic study that would include the all of downtown and access to the highway, as is being explored with the BCR rezoning that's also on the site right now. So there would be full discretion there based on what we knew about our existing traffic background situation.
That's helpful. I wonder, would it, from my perspective, that'd be helpful to include that sort of language here. Do you think that that's necessary, or is that well understood by all parties or a future party reading this policy?
Through the mayor, the existing or the language that's proposed mimics existing language within the plan that was intended to provide this type of flexibility moving forward. I foresee it as being well understood by district staff moving forward, given that the discretion here is whether or not it triggers an OCP amendment or not. It would need to meet the highest threshold.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And then I did just want to clarify on page 85 of our package, so this is in the red line version of the zoning bylaw amendments. There's no limitation on the additional residential gross floor area in block C being for rental explicitly. And I just want to confirm that we're actually capturing that additional gross floor area for residential tenure, not just any, sorry, yeah, rental tenure, not just any form of residential.
Is that under the overall density category for MMM.1? Is that where you're
Yeah,
thinking?
that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so section 40 MMM1 in the red line version at least just says section B3, an additional 16,952 square meters of residential gross floor area is permitted within block C.
Thank you for that question through the mayor. So this is staff error not updating the red line thoroughly enough. If you go to the actual bylaw attached to the agenda this evening, section B333 says an additional 16,952 square meters of residential gross floor area is permitted within block C if its use is restricted to residential rental tenure. So it wouldn't allow for any non-rental tenure residential use to be allowed.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And then I had one final question with regards to the employment space, and I really do appreciate the additional work that went into kind of the employment area. I am just curious if staff have a sense of how well the proposed uses and zoning track with our employment needs studies that we've done in terms of that light industrial space, kind of building on Councillor Anderson's question. And I hear staff have kind of heard both things. We have done a little bit of work in economic development. I just didn't have it at the ready to understand if that has been mapped accordingly.
Through the mayor, thank you for that question. And it's deep in my memory bank right now that we did vet this through our land needs. However, I would disclaimer that it hasn't been updated since 2020, so that it is quite out of date. And at the time, it speculated that there was likely enough light industrial supply for the interim. However, advice from senior planners who worked on that project were to continue to pursue light industrial space, given that it can facilitate other uses within it if we were to end up in that place at some point in time. And the uses here were worked with the developer who sees a demand for them in this location.
So I think maybe adjacent to this, in the bylaw, it talks about shared parking facilities can be permitted where it can be demonstrated that peak parking demand for different classes of land use occurs at different times of day or week based on a parking study completed by a professional engineer to satisfaction of the district at development permit. At development permits, there's no tenants yet. So how does that, this feels like standard language. It wasn't one of the pieces that changed, but just, I know recently we had a temporary use permit that sort of ran into this issue, and the timing of that was a challenge. So we have no tenants at development permit. How does that generally, and we never do, or rarely do, I guess. So how does that work here? And I'm feeding into trying to understand be able to rationalize the checks and balances for the parking asks that are coming with this application.
Thank you through the mayor. So the tenancies are not normally known at development permit. That is true. In this case, the zoning was fairly constrained. So the parking use calculation will be fairly consistent. Parking is typically checked at building business license, excuse me. And so we do end up in situations where perhaps the parking doesn't fit if a use that is wasn't contemplated at the time a development permit comes in. So sometimes there are some conflicts there. The provision of the zoning bylaw doesn't contemplate future tenancies, but rather generalized uses. And that's what we would be subject to at this point. So there are some limitations there. The developer does have some ideas about future tenancies, and that would come forward through their parking strategy that would be required at development permit.
Okay, so but like hours of operation of the commercial units or something like that, where like to me the residential use is generally understood that that's higher, more people are at home in the evenings and weekends, and but that level of restriction isn't something that we would include in a zoning, whether it's a zoning or a CD zone or otherwise. Like we leave it open to like just being resolved there. We don't add further constraints. Don't help the situation.
I'm sorry, could you clarify your question, please?
Well, I'm just wondering about like hours of, we've got general uses, but hours of operation or other factors that would help it like achieve this or realize the benefit of the shared use. I believe in the shared use, but it's just such a general concept. It's not as clearly articulated as as it could be, but maybe this is as far as we can go. So I'm just trying to understand if we could put some other mechanisms in there to help that actually happen.
Thank you. Yeah, so through the shared parking strategy that we're requiring, we're hoping to get more of at least how the parking would be managed on site if there are those conflicts moving forward. So how would the residential tenants have access to parking? Would there be access in the evenings for additional parking for residential units, and what hours would be restricted? Again, that's a detail that we are deferring at this time. The zoning bylaw provision doesn't add any additional requirements on our end to require anything else.
Okay, no, thank you for that explanation. I'm going to go to Councillor Greenlaw.
Thanks. Through the chair, I just had a couple questions, and one of them was about the childcare facility that is 4,200 square feet. And I was wondering if staff could comment on the feasibility of actually finding somebody to run a childcare facility of that size, given some of the cost realities around it.
Thank you through the chair. Our understanding through working through the childcare regulations is that the space that they're providing would provide the ideal ratio of toddler to infant toddler to 3 to 5 numbers of 25 to 12, which is the ideal class size for staffing ratio to optimize a childcare facility. In terms of actual lease rates and leasing it out, I can't comment on that given that we don't know future economic conditions, but the use would be restricted to childcare.
Okay, and do we currently have any, like we don't have a childcare of that size in the community right now, do we?
Through the mayor, can't confirm that, but I would say that it's not, it's pretty typical size in terms of a new space that can then be devised into multiple spaces if necessary. So it's not atypical.
Okay, and so the numbers that were here, the ratios that you're referring to, those are probably what will actually be strived for. I wasn't sure if that was something that was just going to change as the project evolved, kind of thing.
Thank you through the mayor. The ratio of children within or that could be provided for, the ratio of children that could go to this childcare facility based on ages is regulated through the childcare regulations based on amount of space available. And typically that's the ratio required to make a daycare economically feasible based on our understanding to date.
Okay, thanks. And then I just had another question about the minimum of 11 spaces at grade over height that will be dedicated to residential use, and how are those going to be allocated to units?
Thank you through the mayor. So the allocation will be at the discretion of the final owner of the units. We are anticipating more detail around that at development permit through the shared parking strategy. At this stage, we know that they are intent on providing 11 over height spaces at this time, but how they're finally allocated typically lands with the final owner of the units. And again, we were looking for more clarity at a later stage.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, thanks. With the new low carbon step code and where we've adopted that, would the residential units effectively, and I know I've been a strong advocate of making sure that one of the gas utilities doesn't find a loophole, but as we understand things now, does that step code effectively already ensure that all residential is no gas in effect?
Through the mayor, that is correct. The Ocean lines would also be subject to the building bylaw, which would set the residential carbon step code at EL4.
Okay, so if I was interested, or if we were interested in no gas for this particular parcel, all uses, is that something where staff would prefer us sort of move first reading with that, or second reading and come back with that change at public hearing, or what would be a preferred route there?
Through the mayor, we've had these discussions with the applicant, and that is not a direction that the applicant has agreed to go towards. So council would then essentially be giving bylaw readings on an application that's not in alignment with the application.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Pettingill.
So if we weren't comfortable with that, would it be better to refer this back to staff for further discussion, sort of stating that fact, or would the proponent be happier if this would just defeat it, or what would be the and I don't know where my colleagues are, but
Through the mayor, can't speak for the proponent, but those are the options that council has. Council can proceed with one reading, two readings, refer it back to staff, or defeat the bylaw.
I think it's quite common a proponent's perspective is advancing in some way. So I don't know we need staff to, or it's fair to get staff to speculate further on that. But do you have another question?
well, I was going to attempt a motion then.
I'll just make sure that see if there's any other questions in the room, and I'll come back to you. I don't see any, so I'll go to you. Go ahead, Councillor.
So I would move first reading with a change to no gas for all uses, and I would speak to that if seconded.
So are you proposing, just to be sure, all uses or all of the, are you moving the suite of recommendations with that addition? That's your intent there? Okay. Councillor, is there a seconder for this? Councillor Greenlaw seconds. Okay, go ahead, Councillor, speak to it.
Yeah, so I am generally, I think, supportive of what's here. Don't want to kill this and would like to be clear with the developer, I think, what the expectation is and allow it to move forward without stopping it, but sort of make that clarity. The no gas across doesn't seem like a big advantage, and there's parking considerations and some other things I think we are giving up. I think we've been fairly consistent in our expectation. We know this is massive growth, which comes with embodied emissions. We have very significant targets we have to hit. And so we have to be very thoughtful about what kind of long-term emissions we're building in with this unavoidable growth. And so we have to start tackling this. And so I'm wanting to see this move forward. To comment from my colleague, I am not looking for this to be prescriptive of it must be electric. I know some of my colleagues have other ideas of what this could be, and so I'm not looking to preclude any of those other options. But I think, all of our climate action planning and everything is fairly clear. And it doesn't address the rest of the site, but for this parcel, I think we've been very clear with most developments that have come before us that this is the expectation. I think we don't have a choice but for this to be the expectation with the amount of growth we have, especially.
Other comments on the motion we have before us? Yeah, Councillor Stoner.
I realize that there is a motion on the floor, so I guess I'll ask this question through the chair to my colleague who put the motion on the floor. Are you aware of other developments where we've required this in light industrial spaces? I know we've done it in commercial and residential.
Off the top of my head, I think there's one, but I'm not positive. But to my mind, it doesn't really matter. The fact that something is industrial doesn't change the reality of our situation in terms of emissions. And there are lots of businesses that can operate even industrial without gas. And we just don't have a choice to build long-term dependence, 40-year dependence on new fossil fuel. So we have to start figuring out ways, I think, to move away from this. The rest of the site and carbon engineering, there are lots of parcels still on the site that can use gas, and because we're not changing any of those, but in this one where we, I think, are giving up some in terms of parking and density and other things, I don't think this is an unreasonable request.
I can appreciate that council's mulling this this turn of events over. I'm a little I understand what we're trying to achieve here with first reading and this addition. I'm concerned that we're you know, I wonder if second and see what happens and leave this as a recommendation of council. We can speak to it as in comments and see what happens at public, you know, following public hearing. I just I'm a little worried about delay of this actually being able to get back to us and continue to move through the process, where generally this is you know, has many other aspects going on besides this one piece. So I'm just weighing that delay and the benefit of that. So I see our corporate officer, or nope, trying to bring my attention to Mr. Valniscus. So Mr. Valniscus.
Thank you, and apologies for interjecting in council's discussion. Just wanted to clarify that staff are not aware of any projects that would have light industrial with a no gas commitment.
Councillor Pettingill.
The reason I just did first is my understanding that this sort of change would be difficult to make after second, but if we are comfortable that we can give second reading with this expectation, then I'd be fine to amend my motion to do that. My goal is not to slow things down, but I think we have to deal with the reality before us. We can address it on the site, and so the most efficient way to do that is fine with me.
I'll go around and see if there's any other comments, and then on this particular piece, go ahead, Councillor Greenlaw.
Well, I think it's important to facilitate this transition away from fossil fuels. And right now, obviously, our upper levels of government are not going to support that. So it's up to municipalities to start decreasing the infrastructure that's being put into the ground for new builds. And maybe this is the first light industrial space that does it. And then, yay, we have a little feather in our cap. We're the first light industrial space to do it. But I do think it's important that we keep facilitating that transition. And this is a way of doing that.
Thank you. Councillor Stoner.
Can someone remind me what the motion is on the floor, and procedurally, if this is defeated, I'm assuming that we need an amendment and not to defeat it if we want it to keep moving.
That's my understanding, but I will go to a corporate officer for clarity here, and I will just speak to what's been moved. What's been moved is all the recommendations only for one reading instead of the recommended two, with the addition of the no gas covenant. As to where we are process-wise, I'll go to corporate officer.
Thank you. Through the chair, Sarah Morris, Deputy Corporate Officer. At the moment, you have a motion on the floor with the no gas for all uses included. If council wants to proceed with this, they should amend the motion to remove that stipulation, and then council will be left with the staff recommendation as it was presented in the agenda package.
So we would need to amend. Defeating this would defeating what we have in front of us would defeat the overall. So I think there's multiple pieces to this. So I think I'll test an amendment that it's two readings. I'll speak to it if it's seconded by Councillor Pettingill. I think that we need to keep moving forward, and I think I appreciate the spirit of giving space and time for these things to be addressed. I just I feel that we need to move a bit. We can do that by moving a bit further. And just as a courtesy, I will bring another amendment just to have the discussion about the no gas covenant as an attempted amendment following this one, just so that we can make sure we have a clear conversation about that going forward as an amendment rather than debating the overall tied up with that particular piece. So, but first of all, first amendment would be two readings. Any comments on the two readings aspect of this? Seeing none, so I'll call the question on the amendment. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. So now we've got an amended motion, and I'll move that we I'd move that the motion be amended to remove the no gas covenant portion. And if it's seconded, I will speak to it. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, remove. So right now, the original was across all residential uses. I changed that to all uses on the site.
Yeah, so sorry, my intention was the additional language, so it'd revert to the all uses language. And if it's seconded, I'll speak to it. Is that was that what your hand was for, Councillor Anderson? Second. So I want to have I think this creates space for us to have a conversation specifically on that motion, and we can vote for this initiative or not, separate from defeating the overall. And that's why I thought it was important that we have this space to do just that. So to keep us on side of things process wise, and that way, if this is defeated, then it stays where we are. We call a vote on the package that we've got already. So I'm trying to, and now where I land, so one is creating the opportunity to have this discussion without a failed vote here, sinking this whole initiative. And then the second, I think that my preference is that we land with a no gas for all uses on site, but I don't like being prescriptive of it at this juncture because it feels like a new introduction to this light industrial space. So I think we need to be really careful here. There's a lot of things that here to like that are positive from an economic development perspective, from an environmental perspective, as far as local employment space, housing close to amenities, and all those other things. But it's the introducing a new concept at readings that wasn't contemplated at committee of the whole. I think that we can send a message that we would like to see it, and perhaps it's not the stretch for the proponent to get there, and they're watching this proceedings right now as well. But I have a hard time tying up the totality of the project on this particular piece. I see your hand to comment. Have I said something that took us offside? No, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I think there's some confusion at the staff level as to where council are with this amendment.
So
if
thank you.
Wouldn't mind.
I will clarify.
Thank you.
The amendment was to revert to the staff recommendation language. So it was removing that addition that was brought in the first motion.
Add second reading.
And add second reading we already did. So now this is just that gas piece. So with that clarity, I'll go to Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, just to clarify, my recollection is we did raise this, and I think staff said in their presentation, we did raise this at the committee of the whole and set this expectation. The proponent said, no, that's not what we're interested in. And I'm asking that we hold firm. So this isn't a switch. And I think this is important. And so I will not support the amendment and likely would not support second reading if this amendment passes.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. Through the chair, thanks to my colleague for raising this and for the proposed amendment. I think it's a really important conversation for us to be having. And I hear the urgency and the efforts to try and use all the tools in our toolbox to achieve our community climate action plan and the goals in our OCP. Where I think I am challenged in this is I go back to a presentation that we received from I think it was AKA Architecture, when we were doing a review of our own facilities and trying to figure out how we could get them to be either LEED certified or net zero. And one of the pieces that the architect said to us was that you want to start to think of your community in a kind of network type mode, where we know that each individual building is not going to be able to achieve net zero. So fire halls cannot achieve net zero, but you might be able to have another building that generates energy. And so what you want to start to think of it is as a network or a microcosm across your community to be able to achieve your overall goals. And so my concern about adding this language in here at second reading is that we're putting too much onus on one particular project, especially for an introduction at light industrial, which we haven't done previously to my knowledge. Not to say that we shouldn't be forcing or encouraging people to do so. I just don't think that this is a fair time to do it. While I appreciate we raised it in committee of the whole, what I've heard from staff is that at this point in time, it doesn't feel feasible. And I think that there's a trade-off there to either pushing for it and delaying or potentially not receiving the benefit of the rental housing for our community, the additional economic space for our community. Whereas I think that we can do that in partnership and trying to achieve the overall reduction in carbon emissions across the site as a whole, with another rezoning that's potentially coming on this site or adjacent to this site, and or more broadly in policy direction. And so that's where my challenge is with the original motion that was put forward, and why I think I will be supporting the amendment as presented. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments on the amendment? I think yeah, I'll be supporting the amendment largely for not dissimilar reasons. We just heard. I think that we think about the spaces that we need, and I don't think that we're moving community goals forward if we create some employment spaces or light industrial spaces that remain empty because they don't have the facilities that the tenants are looking for. And I do think that a better approach to this light industrial piece probably deserves attention at a higher policy level than on this particular development at this point in time. So that's why I'll be supporting this amendment, and seeing no other hands. Oh, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. Also supporting the amendment. Two things arise for me in dialogue around the province, and not from, by the way, Fortis BC. It's being pointed out that local government may not have the jurisdiction to pursue no gas covenants. And the reason for this is that Fortis BC as an energy provider has a legal mandate. And in fact, Fortis BC's origins is as a government agency, as a utility, heavily regulated utility. So that's one issue, and it is being talked about, and I don't know where that's going to go. But the more important to me is that I think it may be timely for council and staff together to pursue some orientation on energy system issues and trends. They do evolve. There's been 2 episodes where the district has pursued, or council has pursued, workshops on this topic. One was 15, 16 years ago when we were doing community energy planning. And again, when our Community Climate Action Plan was introduced in 2020, we had a series of workshops on what's going on with energy systems. And maybe it's time that we relook at those. And anyway, my suggestion is, following two previous speakers, let's look at the overall rather than focus on this one project, and maybe take a step back and see where we need to follow up on some orientation and updates on what's going on with energy systems and buildings relevant to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Go ahead, Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, I just want to respond to my colleague, and I understand thinking about things in a system, but again, this is the one part of this where the industrial might not have gas. The rest of the industrial and commercial can have gas still. And so in terms of where this is happening, this is the one spot where we are talking about. And there's been nothing that we have done anywhere in Squamish where the emissions have been below zero in terms of energy emissions and then embodied. Still everything is adding emissions, and we're adding people and adding and adding and adding. We have to start figuring out ways to have negative emissions buildings or negative emissions. We haven't done that once. And so I don't think it's unreasonable on this one parcel on this whole site to say, hey, the industrial piece, like none of the uses can use gas. And again, the rest of the site, the employment are allowed to, that's where it is. Whether I like it or not. And so, you know, we are thinking about the system. And we just, unfortunately, we don't have a choice. We can't create a bunch of 20-year jobs that depend on gas. Unfortunately, the climate reality doesn't allow that. So anyways, thank you.
Thank you. So I'll call the question on the amendment. All in favor? And opposed? Councillor Pettingill and Greenlaw opposed. Motion carries. So now we're back to the main motion twice amended. Any comments on where we on this new configuration? I'll go to Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, as I said, without this is not supportable for me. I understand this will be coming back, I believe, to a public hearing. Maybe I'm being optimistic, but I would love to hear the developer come with a resolution here. There's still an opportunity for that, and maybe my vote isn't necessary, but I believe this proponent has in general shown a lot of creativity and attention to the community and care for a lot of important things. I think there's some new family members involved and probably some reasons to really consider some of this and what can we do together? Is there a way, could we add a story of residential, for example, and make this all work and maybe given our housing challenges and some of the other things, maybe that's something else that makes this workable. And so I would love to find a workable collaborative solution. I don't want to totally throw this out, but until this piece is resolved, I would not be able to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Mayor Herford, this is time for general comments on the staff presentation. Thank you. Firstly, there is reference to the parking section on the proposed parking ratio higher than what is permitted in the main downtown area. I would just like to remind us all again that the background of the downtown parking regulation is something that we shouldn't overlook, and it is that in 15 years ago exactly when that regulation came into play, the objective was to address a lack of commercial and mid-rise mixed-use development investment in the downtown. There was none. And so the outcome was a parking regulation that would level the playing field with the malls up the valley. That was quite explicit at that time in 2009, 10, 11. Secondly, I'd like to address the issue of placemaking. And staff have referred to that there would be 2 interpretive signs along Kemmesh, the Cattermole Slough. And I think while we can all applaud what has been achieved on the Spukwis Feather Beach in terms of placemaking, there's much more that can be done. And I happen to know that the development team is quite interested in the topic of maritime history, culture, and traditions, much more than, well, what we've discussed about. And I guess the main issue I have here is that I think this should be addressed in our giving encouragement to it. The Marine Action Strategy has 2 sections dealing with this, and I suggest that that strategy might be cited. There's a section 4.3, Maritime History, Culture, and Traditions, increase profile, public appreciation, and awareness of Squamish as a coastal community with marine history, traditions, and assets. Lots of coastal communities and coastal developments, waterfront developments do this quite successfully, and it's something I think we're missing out on. So 2 interpretive signs to me is insufficient. We've got 2.5 centuries of maritime history here beyond the time immemorial of the Squamish Nation people. And I think we're missing out on that, and we should be encouraging that. And the developer is interested, I'm well aware. I think we should be citing our marine action strategy and the policy direction it is giving on that. Thirdly, I'd like to address the attachment 4, which does two things. It has a comparative analysis on employment, the marine industrial employment versus the mixed use that's now proposed, and has a summary of challenges in utilizing that site for marine industrial. To me, that summary of challenges was sufficient. The comparative analysis is flawed fundamentally because you're comparing apples and oranges. Marine light industrial land is like agricultural land. It is precious, scarce, non-replaceable. We don't compare it with other types of industrial or employment uses. It's just a fundamentally flawed analysis in its what is expected of it. And related to that, I would like to express regret that we are not giving attention to the central issue in this whole proposal, is that we now do not know where we're going to locate marine light industrial. And there's a deja vu for me here. The same occurred during the same proposal of converting marine light industrial to mixed use residential happened at Waterfront Landing. There was an earlier sub-area plan and an earlier zoning which provided for light industrial space, marine-oriented light industrial activities such as small boat building, repair and maintenance in marinas within the mixed-use area. The developer came along and presented us with a study in 2016 and suggested that while there is clearly demand for all of this, and they went into detail on that, although the demand for these marine uses could be located at Waterfront Landing, basically it's not our vision. It would detract from the vision to create a strong residential development with commercial village and park amenities. Therefore, the marine light industrial should be located on district land across the channel and on Mr. Keith Scott's land. We're doing the same thing again. We're bouncing around, not knowing where to locate the marine light industrial. I'm just going to wrap up here, Mr. Mayor, that I think it's a serious issue and that it's not properly highlighted for all of us here. We're acknowledging a land use proposal. Okay, the summary of challenges convinces me, but I think we have to face the fact, the serious fact of scarcity and how are we going to solve this? Where's it going to go? It should be raised as a serious issue, in fact, in the report before us. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments on the motion as amended? Go ahead.
Thanks, through the chair. I also won't be supporting the motion on the floor, in part because of the no gas conversation, but also I do have concerns that the 4,800 square foot childcare facility will not be feasible, and it'll be difficult to find a tenant at Squamish prices, but mostly because I was uncharacteristically on board with the reduced parking proposed at the cow, but this further reduction, I feel, will be too much. From what I can tell, the parking being proposed is between 25 to 40% below the currently required amounts of parking for each unit type. So we've somehow decreased the number of parking stalls being built since the cow, while simultaneously the changes in unit types have dictated an overall increase in required parking. Also, piggybacking on some of Councillor Anderson's comments, I believe I made this comment at the cow, but it would be really interesting to see more marine life representation in the form of information placards on the shore, if that's at all an option. And I'd also like to echo his concerns about the light industrial land on marine land. Thanks.
Thank you. Other comments? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Councillor Pettingill and Greenlaw opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. Council, I think we've earned ourselves a quick break before the next topic here. So I will let staff get set up for that, but I'll call a 10-minute recess, and we'll be back here at 7:30. So we're in recess. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We are now on to consideration of first, second, and third reading, and that's the District of Squamish fees and charges bylaw, credit card surcharge, airport filming fees, and general amendments. I'll turn it over to staff to run this through. Over to you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Rianne Sousa, and I'm the Director of Financial Operations at the district. I'm joined today by Nav Triplett. Oh, sorry, my screens. What happened there? Oh, there. Joined by Nav Triplett, Real Estate Portfolio Manager. Today we are presenting an amendment to the District of Squamish Fees and Charges bylaw. The primary amendments for council consideration this evening include adding a 2.4% credit card surcharge to several charges listed within the bylaw schedules, increasing airport filming fees, and removing charges that are no longer applicable due to changes in technology, legislation, or internal process. To note, the district will be doing a fulsome update to the fees and charges bylaw in fall of 2025. The district is presently in the process of implementing online services, which gives customers the ability to view account information online and make payment via credit card online. Prior to implementation of online services to control credit card fees payable by the district, credit card payments were only accepted for fees less than $2,000. A limitation of the new online services system is it cannot accommodate a cap on payments. Therefore, staff are proposing that a credit card surcharge of 2.4% is applied to some fees and charges. Applying a credit card surcharge enables the district to expand the services it provides to customers while not increasing property taxes or utility fees to do so. Since the online services implementation is ongoing, staff will bring back to council if it recommends the application of credit card surcharges to any other fees. Although there will be a fulsome update of the fees and charges bylaw in the fall, we are taking the opportunity today to recommend updates to the airport fees, as these fees have not been updated since 2011. Currently, the daily fee for both parking lots is $250 per day, and use of the runway, taxiway, and apron is $750 per day. After consultation with district's aviation consultant, staff are proposing to increase fees to $750 per parking lot per day, $750 per hour for the taxiway and apron, and $1,500 per hour for the runway. Several schedules contain charges that are outdated and that are no longer applicable due to changes in technology, legislation, or internal district processes. Staff recommend removing the outdated charges in schedules 1, 6, 10, 14, 17, and 23. Staff recommend that the amendment to the fees and charges bylaw be given first 3 readings. If the bylaw receives first 3 readings this evening, it will be listed on the April 15th, 2025 regular business meeting agenda for adoption. This concludes the presentation. I'll now turn it back to the chair.
Thank you. Council, questions on this? Councillor Stoner, over to you.
Thank you. Through the chair, I was just curious why we're applying the credit card surcharge in some circumstances, but not others. So for example, in Schedule 22, the temporary noise permit fees, the credit card surcharge is only applicable to construction noise, but not filming or special events. I'm just curious why that differentiation.
Through the chair, it's due to the phase of the online implementation. So filming fees and permits haven't been brought online yet.
To follow up on that, is there a way that we can do this such that like either the fee just applies once those do go online, or does it need to come back for another bylaw amendment? or can we add some language that would clarify why it only applies to some and not others? It just, especially Schedule 22 just really stood out at me as to the differentiation, but there was no clear reasoning as to why.
Thank you. Sarah Morris, Manager of Legislative Services, Deputy Corporate Officer. Through you, Chair, it would be preferable for the bylaw to come back again once those fees have been moved online, just so there's no confusion as to moving forward at this point. At this point, staff are planning to do a 6-month update to the fees and charges bylaw, so we won't see it as often unless it's urgently needed to be updated. And so we're trying to merge all of the amendments into a bigger update twice a year at this point.
You're okay for right now, Councillor Stoner? Other questions on this? Go ahead.
Does 2.4% cover the cost or the fees that we have to pay in turn for accepting a card? Or are we still taking a loss? And I'm just wondering if staff can speak to, does it depend on the card, or how do we manage that?
Through the chair, it's cost recovery. So it's recovering our costs. And we can't consider going greater than 2.4% because the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada limits the credit card surcharge to 2.4%.
Thank you. Other comments? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Herford. The context that a more fulsome update is on the way is, I think, probably going to answer my question. I'll ask it anyway. In part 5, 5.3 and 5.4 both refer to specific dates related to COVID-19, completely outdated. So my original question was going to be, would it be worthwhile to deal with those now? I suspect we'll just take care of those when this comes back to us for the more fulsome update. Is that the case?
Through you, Chair, could Councillor French repeat the question?
So in part 5, there's 5.3 and 5.4 are clauses that are very specific to COVID-19 with specific dates that are long out of date. And so my question is, will we be dealing with the removal of those when the more fulsome update comes?
Through the chair, that would be correct. We could review and remove those outdated clauses when the bylaw comes back. However, council, it's up to you to decide on bylaw amendments, and you may include that in a motion if you so desired. However, we can flag that for the next update if you feel like it's not 100% urgent at this point.
Yeah, I don't feel it's 100% urgent at this point. Thank you.
Councillor Stoner, is it on this point?
Yeah,
go ahead.
sure. I'm just wondering if my colleague can clarify which page number you're talking about.
Yes, I can. Hold on. Page 9 of 76. And that's all I can offer.
Okay, I'll take us on another journey here, and we'll see if we come back to this, if we need to come back to this point. I was curious about the airport, the filming fees, and just there was a little bit of in the presentation. There's some mention that there's other facilities have can continue to operate while filming's happening is one of the considerations. But I wondered where. Like this maximum 10,000 per day, which is strangely 6.66 hours of filming. I just wondered why we didn't align that to like a normal, like a multiple of that in hours. But are we saying that we can go, we're fine to go above that once you hit the 10, you're fine, or we will not consider going past allowing this use for 6.66 hours, which equals $10,000 a day at $1,500 an hour? What are we saying there exactly?
Through the chair, so that's correct, that it could be anything over that. So could be 10 hours, 12 hours. We wouldn't limit just to the 6.6 hours.
So I know this is just the fees and charges, but where do we find whether it's appropriate to even entertain having the facility impeded in this way for that length of time? Like I get that it's not likely in this fees and charges bylaw. So where does that aspect come into play?
So we would discuss with the tenants, and we also discuss with the arts and culture manager, and then we kind of make those decisions. And this doesn't happen very often either. Like, I can't remember in the last few years us shutting down the runway. We have had tenants kind of individually working with film companies. So this is not a frequent occurrence.
Okay. And then was it just the nice round numbers is how we landed on the 10,000 and 5,000 and then worked that out? It just seems a bit odd that it's not a clear multiple of the hourly rate.
Through the chair, so we took the recommendations from the aviation consultant, and I guess they kind of looked at other communities and recommended that. So we went with their recommendation on that.
Okay. I'm going to go around the table, see if there's any other questions here. I'm not seeing any other hands. We do have a recommendation before us. There was that other topic. I'll go to Councillor French.
Well, I'm ready to move it because it's not a concern for me, and Councillor Stoner doesn't have her hand up. So
okay, I'll second the motion. Would you like to speak to it?
Yes, I think that there will be some members of our community who are looking forward to some of these changes, bringing us a little further into the modern world of technology and the advantages that the inner nerd offers us. So thanks to staff for bringing this forward and allowing us to make this change.
Thank you. Any other comments on this? I'm supportive of, I'll be voting in support of this. I think the cost recovery of aspect of this financially from the credit card piece in particular, I think is quite important, and the changes at the airport just make good sense and put us where we should be. So yeah, feels pretty easy to support this. So with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And I'll put it back to and I'll turn it back to staff for our next topic here. Hey, the floor is yours when you're ready.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Nav Triplett, Real Estate Portfolio Manager, and I'm joined by Shannon White, Integrated Solid Waste Specialist, and Neil Plum, the Director of Real Estate. We are here today to obtain first three readings of proposed amendments to the Notice Enforcement and Municipal Ticket Information Bylaws. The amendments will facilitate enforcement of the airport, solid waste utility, and single-use items bylaws. In November 2024, Council endorsed amendments to the solid waste utility bylaw and the repeal and replacement of the single-use items bylaw. At that time, the notice enforcement and municipal ticket information bylaws were not amended. An update to a section reference is required to align with the November updates to the solid waste utility bylaw, and a schedule needs to be replaced to align with the new bylaw sections in the single-use items bylaw. The fine amounts will remain the same. At this time, we also wanted to make some general housekeeping changes, including changes to how schedules are referenced so that every time a schedule is added, that we don't have to update certain sections, as well as updating staff titles and ordering of a column in Schedule F. Revisions are also required to the airport schedules in both bylaws. These revisions include updating late penalties in the notice enforcement bylaw, as shown in red, and as shown in orange. 29 individual offenses have been listed in updated schedules for both bylaws. The rest of the fines remain unchanged. To conclude, we are seeking first readings of the notice enforcement and municipal ticket information amendment bylaws, and we will now turn it over to council.
Thank you. Any questions on this, council? If not, we do have a recommendation if that's where we are. Are you moving the staff recommendation?
Staff recommendation, yeah.
There's a seconder for that. Seconded by Councillor French. Would you like to speak to it?
Seems pretty straightforward to me.
Councillor French.
Seems pretty straightforward to me as well, and wanted to point out in supporting the motion that the Squamish Climate Action Network this morning, before noon, announced that coffee cups would be banned next month. Single-use coffee cups would be banned next month in all Squamish coffee shops. Good on them for what I thought was an excellent April Fool's joke, because they got me. Took me a second to realize what was going on. So good work, Squamish Can.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a bit risky having a meeting on it today, even, I think, but thank you for that. Just happy to support this. I think I'm happy to see that sort of that ongoing upkeep of our bylaws, and this makes good sense to me. So thank you for bringing the work to get it here, and happy to support. So with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, so next item here, as staff are getting set up, is consideration of second reading. This is the District of Squamish Official Community Plan Bylaw number 2500-2017 Amendment Bylaw, which is the Garibaldi Estates Neighborhood Plan. And we have our staff getting ready to run us through a presentation.
And just before we begin, I would just like to introduce our staff here. Sarah McJennett is our new manager of community planning. Sarah's been with the district for many years as a senior planner, and is now overseeing any land use and community planning policy projects, such as neighborhood planning. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Jonas. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Matt Gunn. As you know, I'm here with Sarah McJennett. I'm a planner with the District of Squamish. And I just felt like I had to say it's nice to follow a straightforward item, because this has not always been a straightforward item. We're back with the Garibaldi Estates neighborhood planning process, presenting for consideration of second reading. As background, the Garibaldi Estates neighborhood plan was initiated in 2021. The process has involved multiple engagement stages. In stage 3 of the process, the community considered land use scenarios and policy directions. A draft plan was developed in stage 4 and presented to the community. Council provided feedback on that draft plan in September 2024. Council gave the plan first reading on December 17th, 2024. But at that time, Council directed staff to address the outcome of a Mashada Creek hazard assessment in the plan, which is what we have done. I have 2 quick slides to provide an overview of the plan. The plan outlines a vision of the future for the neighborhood, which aligns with guiding principles developed during the planning process. The plan promotes a complete community through an increased diversity of land use. Employment and services are supported within the village, the Garibaldi village, throughout the neighborhood as accessory commercial units. Mixed-use retail residential buildings are envisioned as part of a new pedestrian-oriented high street along Diamond Head Road. Expanded ground-oriented residential uses such as multiplexes and townhouses are supported between Mamcram Road and Diamond Road. Public open spaces are supported through planned policies, including the development of a greenway along Mamquam Road and a new neighborhood park. And the plan highlights transportation and connectivity opportunities through proposed improvements to active transportation and the establishment of mid-block connections. Following first reading, staff continued to work with a consultant to complete the Master Creek Overland Flow Hazard Assessment. That study was completed in February of this year. The study examines a hypothetical flood risk in the Garibaldi Estates caused by an avulsion or a blockage of Masheter Creek. The situation this hazard represents is related to Columnar Peak, which is above Elfin Lakes, back there above our town. It's composed of volcanic material similar to Enchikai. In the scenario, material would collapse off Columnar, flow down Masheter drainage, and be added to from the creeks and rivers along the way, and create a blockage near the bridge at Paco Road that could direct Masheter Creek towards the golf course and the estate's neighborhood. In the Integrated Flood Hazard Management Plan, a flood construction level of 1 meter was established for that area based on provincial standards without having conducted a detailed analysis of that hazard. The Masheter Creek Overland Flow Hazard Assessment that was just completed modeled the impact of the hazard to determine the potential flood depth, and it determined that they were significantly lower than would justify the 1 meter flood construction level that had been established for much of the estate's neighborhood. Most of the water would flow across the golf course and head into the Mamquam River. A small amount of water would pond in the southwest corner of the estate's neighborhood in a couple sections. Now, the model identified a few areas where that ponding might occur, but the consultants said that there really wasn't enough detail in the information they were working off of to really understand exactly where that ponding would occur, but it was not a significant amount of water. So based on that model output, the report included recommendations for 3 different management areas to address the flood hazard. Area 1, which is the orange and makes up most of the plan area. This area was previously subject to a 1 meter flood construction level. The hazard assessment recommended a flood construction level of 0.3 meters above Crown of Road. Area 2, which is in blue and includes the northwest portion of the plan area and areas on the opposite side of the highway. And that does include the Spectacle building, just for reference. For this area, the hazard assessment recommends using the existing flood hazard management plan flood construction levels based on the integrated flood hazard management plan, as is the current situation. Area 3 in purple, which is the golf course and the Spiral Mobile Home Park, is outside the plan area. And the current 1 meter flood construction level utilized on provincial standards is recommended to be continued forward. And then the northeast portion of the plan area, which includes residential areas around Pat Good and Coho Park, and was previously subject to a 1 meter flood construction level, was determined not to have flood risk, and so no flood construction level is recommended for that area. So based on the results of that study, the plan was updated to reflect the identified flood construction levels. Specifically, road cross sections were updated, including areas where mixed-use buildings will feature retail spaces at ground level. This is a really critical component because it's addressing the connection between the road and the retail frontage in these areas. And that previously was a challenge because if there's a 1 meter flood construction level, creating accessible ramping up to those spaces was quite a design challenge.
I'm just going to stop you before you go. Did you have a question about the map before that will feed into this, or are you okay to wait till after till a natural break? I just want to make sure we don't go too
Just on the table, I was hoping for a quick clarification.
Yeah, do you mind just going back there and we'll get that clarification?
Absolutely.
So the area 1, the 0.3 meter FCL, sorry, is that the change from the Integrated Flood Hazard Management Plan, or that's the new, or what is that number?
Yeah, sorry for the lack of clarity. Previously, that area was subjected to a 1 meter FCL. After this study, it was determined that there was a 0.3 meter FCL, so 30 centimeter FCL was required. To describe it a bit more in detail, the study suggested that most of the water was going to flow across the golf course, but a pulse of water, not very much, could go down the Mamquam Road and flow into a few of those streets. And essentially the streets with curbing, if they eventually have curbing, would act as floodways where that water could flow. And so the 0.3, the depth was anticipated to be about 15 centimeters. And so that 0.3 is expected to create some gradation from the road up to the shop fronts, so that if that pulse of water did come, it's not very much, it just wouldn't reach the retail space.
So it's a 0.7 meter reduction from the original.
Yes, through the mayor, that's correct.
Okay, thank you for that. Go ahead.
Okay, where was that? So road cross sections were updated, including areas where mixed use buildings will feature retail space at ground level. So a really critical component was addressing the connection between the road and the retail frontage. And that involved taking that information from the consultants and then working with our transportation engineers on how that area would be designed. And so the analysis of the cross sections has shown that those necessary flood construction levels could be accommodated within the public realm between the curb and the retail frontage through gradation of the sidewalk, landscape boulevards, bike lanes, and outdoor seating areas where appropriate. And the retail spaces would not need to be built up above the pedestrian realm. You could walk off that sidewalk into those retail spaces with that gradation. Based on the hazard assessment, setbacks were established to accommodate active transportation areas and the pedestrian realm. These setbacks are required between the curb and the retail frontage for that gradation to get to that 0.3 flood construction level. On Tantalus Road, the setback is 2 meters. On Diamond Head Road, north of Diamond Road, the setback is 0.5 meters on the west side. And then on Diamond Head Road south, the setback is 5.5 meters. And these distances of the setbacks are slightly different, partially because the widths of the road allow the gradation of the road to come down further. So the curb starts at a lower level and you need more room to get the 0.3 up to the retail frontage. Also in the plan, the renderings of potential mixed-use developments along Diamond Head were updated. Those previously showed a 1 meter FCL and some ramping and large setbacks. And so now that was replaced with a depiction of a 0.3 meter flood construction level and a 5.5 meter setback. So on Diamond Head Road. I do want to point out one error that's been corrected in the plan since second reading agenda was posted. On page 82, there had been an administrative error in the policy text. The anticipated width of the Diamond Head Road was noted as 1 meter. That's a very narrow road. We don't want Diamond Head Road to be 1 meter wide. The anticipated width is 25 meters. That's been updated on the agenda. So what you have is reflected there. And then should council provide second reading for this updated plan, the next step would be to hold a public hearing. Tuesday, May 27th has been identified as a potential date for the public hearing. That location would be at Brennan Park. At that public hearing, attendees would have an opportunity to provide feedback and commentary comprehensively about the plan and the planning process. And that public hearing would be advertised in the Squamish Chief in 2 consecutive weeks, and we'd use the Let's Talk Squamish mailing list, which we've been using for communication throughout the process, to notify everyone with details about the hearing. The staff recommendation is to provide the plan with second reading. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I'll go to council for questions on what we've seen. Councilor Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you very much for all the work for many years you've been doing on this, and all the rest of staff. A question about which may come from the long time this has been coming. On page 12 of the actual, this is of the actual neighborhood plan. Nope, page 12 of the staff report, which is on the neighborhood plan. It lays out the zoning of the existing zoning in Garibaldi Estates, and it still uses RS1 and RS1A. Those Garibaldi Estates is now all R1. Should that be updated?
Sorry, can you clarify where you're looking? I'm just trying to find that.
All right, so
Page 12 of the
digital page 19 of 245 of the downloadable staff report from civic info, or it's section 2.1.2 zoning, describes current zoning, and that is on, it says page, oh, it may be page 12 of the Garibaldi Estates neighborhood plan.
Yes. That is the existing zoning. Yeah, to the chair, that is, that zoning has changed since that draft. That is unfortunate. I think it's something that it is not necessarily a significant challenge for the planning process, given that those zones, although they have changed, they are reflective, the boundaries haven't changed.
Maybe the question is if council was to support grant second reading as we're being asked, can this be adjusted in between that particular piece, or does this need to be, are we, I don't know that if we should or shouldn't. I'm just curious if this can be updated by the time we get to that public hearing, just to, it seems like a housekeeping matter rather than critical to where we're going. This is where we are stating the starting point. I'll go to Mr. Valdiscus. I think you want to speak to that.
Thank you. I believe council could add it into the motion, giving second reading as amended to replace all the RS1 references with current zoning designations. And then staff will update that for public hearing.
Does RS1, does that cover the change? That would be the only change to this, like the RM2 stuff didn't move if I look at that page. I just want to make sure we give broad enough, because it's not, might be just to double check that labeling's right.
Oh, sorry. I think it's just RS1 and RS1A. Oh, there's RS2 there and RS3. Yeah. Yeah. All right. It could be the RS zones.
The RS zones. Okay. We'll take that into consideration for when we get to a motion here. Thank you for that. Other comments or sorry, other questions as we're working towards this piece? I'll venture one on the road cross-section piece. And I appreciate that we have more room further south on Diamond Head Road. That space would be used to, as proposed, would be for parking those two additional pieces. We're not talking two lanes, like in the rendering, it just, I'm reading it as parking, like 2 lanes of travel, parking each side, and then room for bike infrastructure. Is that the goal there? We're not looking at different traffic volumes or anything like that on that part. Like, it's not a 4-lane road, even though it looks like there's space for that. Just want to make sure that we are clear what we're talking about there.
Yeah, I'll go to the, I think you're talking about Diamond Head Road South, correct?
It's conveniently this piece.
Yeah, Diamond Head Road South. Yeah. So what we're depicting in that image is 2 travel lanes, 2 parking lanes, as you suggested are possible. That's the one with the white lines that stick towards the buildings. And then 2 active transportation lanes, the bike lanes, landscape boulevard for trees, then the walking, then the seating.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Council, any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. It's not actually a question about the report, but it comes up in the report, and it's in the transit component, 2.9.2. It speaks to the density of residents that is considered by BC Transit to be appropriate for a minimum density to support service with a 15-minute frequency. And it says 3,500 residents and jobs per square kilometer. Could you give me a feel for what areas of Squamish already meet that population density threshold, roughly? I mean, obviously the numbers change every year, but roughly what sort of density does that look like?
Through the chair. So we did an analysis and actually counted up the jobs and the people, and I could maybe, if I had a moment, dig around and see. It might even be on the website or in an old web page. But off the top of my head, downtown 100%. I think it exceeds it by a fair margin. maybe like double. I'm really going off memory here. I think when we looked at that, I think the boundaries of some of the neighborhoods were larger. I think we were looking at a bit bigger blocks, and so it's a bit hard to parse out. But I remember my feeling was that the Garibaldi Estates with the commercial provided a pretty high density of jobs, and I think that might have been that zone might have been a fairly strong, if not over the threshold. And there are some areas like the area around Shannon Estates and north of there. We have quite a bit of multifamily, and it might have been there if the boundaries were fairly tight to the residential. The Highlands, nowhere near. Where else? Like Brackendale, nowhere near. Ballycliffe, I think, was too low. So it was really the commercial areas that provided enough density. I think it's been quite a while since I've looked at that, so I apologize with not to have specific detail.
No, that's all right. Thanks very much. Like the idea that downtown far exceeds it, that clearly gives me a view of what that we don't need densities higher than that. That helps. Thanks. It's just really hard to transfer these numbers into what that neighborhood looks like. Yeah.
I have a chart with the neighborhoods and the numbers somewhere if I could dig up.
I feel like we're going to see that at a future transit presentation, if not a future planning presentation. So yeah, thank you for that. Any other questions? We do have a recommendation before us, and I know we spent quite a bit of time with this over the overall process, but including at the last reading. So are you moving the recommendation?
Yeah, I'll move the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Is there Councillor French seconds? Would you like to speak to it? With the additional language to address the references to the existing RS zones. That was his motion. Thank you. And that was what you seconded. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Back to you for comments.
Thank you for the quick reminder. This has been a very long process, and I haven't even been here for all of it. It really has clarified for me a lot of the challenges that exist in neighborhood planning, because we're taking places, homes that people hold dear. Like these are people's homes, and they see changes and evolution, planning. They see the district planning for changes to their neighborhoods, and I think that's challenging. But it's also very important, because if we don't plan these changes will happen in ways that we don't plan. I think that it's great that we are doing this. I think that we have a really strong team of staff thinking about this. We've consulted the community very deliberately, very deeply, and I think that on the balance, we're making a decision that's best for both the existing community and the people who want to live here in the coming 10, 15, 30 years. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Other comments, Councillor French?
Thank you, Mayor Herford. I, through this process, and especially today and in the last week, have been impressed by how the District of Squamish staff has been able to pivot on this project, and the level of flexibility that has been displayed from resident feedback that has been accepted and acted upon, to new provincial policy that came in partway through our process, to this new information on the Masheter flood risk. And all of it done quickly. So granted, this process has been a long one, but when I take a look at how quickly this Masheter flood information was turned around, impressive. And then, to my surprise, as I'm reading through this weekend, a whole page on co-housing, which is an issue that in this process is very new on the scene. So for staff to get a whole page into this report, into this thing on co-housing. Impressive. So I fully support this going to public hearing, and I'm looking forward to hearing the feedback that we get at that public event.
Thank you. Other comments on this? Oh, Councillor Stoner, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair, I too very much support the motion on the floor and giving this second reading so we can get it to public hearing. As others have commented, the process has been long and comprehensive, and I think it's time to get it to final engagement with our community at public hearing. There have been many changes in the context along the way. And as my council colleague just alluded to, we have been nimble to address those. I think one of the challenges is that the context is always changing. And so we could always delay further to address further changes that are happening. But at some point, we need to kind of draw a line and make a decision. And I think we're well at that point. So I look forward to getting this to public hearing, to still hearing from the community as to whether we've got the balance right. I believe we've been thoughtful in trying to address the feedback that we've received, although we haven't been able to address all of it. We aren't ever able to make everybody happy, but that is part of the democratic process and our engagement processes. And we'll put this to public hearing to see who shows up and who has what to say about the product that we have in front of us. But I do think staff have done an excellent job of responding to the pieces that council has pulled out of public engagement so far and addressed those. And most recently, that piece being the detailed analysis on the flood hazard, which I think was well served to update. And here we are, let's keep it moving. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Other comments on this? Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, I will be supporting this going to public hearing. I do want to hear what the public has to say again, or maybe in that format. I have attended numerous public meetings and discussions on this, but always happy to hear more. I want to identify a couple things. I think we identified a potential risk, and we studied it and adjusted our planning. I think it's something we've done numerous times, and it's important for us to do. In this case, it actually meant in some cases we're able to reduce some flood construction level requirements, and which might have otherwise made accessibility more challenging than it had to have been. And so I think we see the benefit in studying those things. The other piece, and I go back to, I know that we haven't. There are some folks that are not happy yet with what is proposed here. I have seen significant changes to this plan throughout, and significant work to accommodate largely folks that do live here and already and are not necessarily enthusiastic about all of the change, and we're still sort of trying to figure out how to get that as right as we can. But I do want to recall, again, there's engagements at the Seniors Activity Center. I'm not getting that name right, but just the enthusiasm of a long-term resident to have a place where they might be able to live, might be able to transition to stay in the community, have it walkable, have it accessible. And so these are the challenges we are facing as a community. There are very few places in the community that can meet that need. And we have to figure out what is the best use of the land. And I want to, it's been said, but I think it's worth reiterating. I think a lot of people, when they see this plan, they see the end goal, the build out at 40 years from now, which is a drastic change, but we are not forcing anyone to change. Some people will decide to sell, and maybe some will come and change things, but other people may not want their property to change right now and may stay there. And so this is what is proposed is a long-term 30, 40-year transition, which, as my colleague said, we are trying to plan for. And there are trade-offs here, and there are different people in our communities, different interests, and we are trying really hard as a community to balance those. We will continue having the discussion, and I want to acknowledge it's not an easy one, especially for people that have made this their home and are looking for some things to not change in the world when there's so much change. But so acknowledge the challenge here, and hopefully we can move forward together as a community.
Thank you, Councillor Pettingill. Other comments? Councillor Anderson?
I'll be brief and start with a quote from the Vancouver Sun, from the Professor of Community and Regional Planning at UBC. If planners and officials, including elected officials, don't listen to residents, they risk losing the public's trust both in them and in densification more broadly. This upcoming public hearing, which I support, will be an important one. Though, and in fact, I doubt that we've seen such an important public hearing and opportunity for the public and for us to consider our input in a long while. So I'm looking forward to that, and I hope that we can all approach it with an open mind and listen carefully to what comes before us at that event. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Greenlaw?
Thanks. I appreciate the aspects of the long-term planning of this document and of the accessible units and the co-housing that Councillor French mentioned. And I look forward to the public hearing, but I'll still be speaking against the motion for concerns that I've stated before that actually align quite nicely with what Councillor Anderson just said. I just feel like there's too much opposition in community about this, and I feel that that has not been adequately incorporated. But again, we'll see at the public hearing how the public feels about it. Thanks.
Thank you. Speaking in support of the motion, I think I really appreciate the sort of the benefit of pausing at the last opportunity that we had this in front of us to wait for this flood hazard piece to come. I think that turning that around in a timely fashion is much appreciated, and also really improves the outcome. I think the initial there was some awkwardness to work around that level, and was part of one of the many things we're balancing as we're trying to do this work. So I've been involved with the process since its inception, and I can see work throughout at all the stages to incorporate as best we can the feedback that we've heard to date, and you know, on balance of all the things we're trying to balance, I think it's well reasoned. But I do look forward to, now that we have this sort of final form of potentially final form of this plan, of putting it in front of the community, so we're not discussing as many hypotheticals as we have been since the start of the project. I do think that. So I look forward to hearing from the community broadly there. Again, I'd like to thank everyone that's engaged with this project from the inception to get us to this point. And as others have mentioned around the long-term aspect of this, except for a master plan part of our community, we don't have anywhere that our zoning is used to the maximum of its potential. So when you look at this in the maximum level, it can be really jarring. That's not something that's going to happen right away, nor is it something that has ever really happened in any of our neighborhoods as well. So I think there is change that will occur, and this process has also prevented a lot of that change from happening over the last while as we were working this out. But the change will be gradual over time, and so I just want to make sure that we're bringing that lens to the discussion, and as folks consume these documents in preparation for the public hearing, that's something that is front of mind. This isn't something that happens tomorrow, next week, or even in the next 5 years. This is a substantial length of time, if ever, to achieve the maximum that this would facilitate. So with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Councillor Greenlaw opposes. Motion carries. Thank you. And that motion didn't give a date for the public hearing, but that's the next step, and that's likely the date. Okay, so that'll be confirmed to come. Thank you very much. So, Council, next we have an adoption. And as per our normal practice, we don't have a presentation here. So Councillor French moves. I'll second. All in favor?
Stop.
Whoa. Oh, sorry.
I'm in
I'm
conflict.
not used to this yet. Councillor Stoner, go ahead.
Sorry, I'd like to take a conflict before this matter is addressed by council because I am a property owner in proximity to this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry for moving so quickly. I'll get used to that one. Okay, so now that Councillor Stoner has excused herself, it's been moved and seconded. Any comments on this? So now I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you.
Can you repeat who's the mover and the second?
John moves. I second. Thank you. Can we get Councillor Stoner back? I'll send her a text. Councillor Stoner's back. Thank you. So moving on, we don't have anything under 8 or 9 or 10, but we do have an item under 11. So this will be 11C, which was the parking recommendation from Committee of the Whole. Councillor Pettingill, you pulled this. Would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, I just wanted the opportunity to change my vote rather than just endorse it as part of the minutes. So I don't know if someone wants to move in second, and I'll speak before it comes to the vote.
So just to be clear, I just want to make sure we have process clear before I start calling a vote. So this has been on the committee recommendation. So are we re-debating the recommendation or accepting the debating acceptance of the recommendation?
Through you, Mayor, Sarah Morris, Manager of Legislative Services. The opportunity for the recommendations from the Committee of the Whole to come before Council for ratification is for sober second thought. So it's up to Council to debate if they wish, or simply move forward with passing those recommendations. There's also an opportunity to amend the recommendations from the Committee of the Whole as well.
Okay, thank you. So I'm cognizant that we don't have support staff here for this if there are any questions that come up from any of the amendments. So I just want to make sure we stay on side with that, and everyone has the information that they need. So to start this off, I'll move that we accept the recommendation from Committee of the Whole. So, and second by Councillor French. And I think we thoroughly debated it that day, and upon reflection, I stand by my my vote there. But welcome ongoing conversation there. So I don't know, Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, I believe I supported this at the end of the Committee of the Whole, although I did express some reservations in terms of what we were actually achieving and versus what we had set out to do. And I just had more time to think about this, and in the context of our strategic planning, that plan which we endorsed, and seeing some of the public feedback. And I'm just at a point now where when I think about what the opportunity was here and what we initially want to do more broadly in terms of parking, there are a few small things we may get out of this, but the cost benefit for me just isn't there. And I think we have so many critical things to focus on. I'm just not comfortable that this really, at the end of the day, is where our efforts belong right at this point in time. So will not support it.
Okay, sorry for the distraction. I'm conferring here. I just want to go to corporate officer. There's 3 recommendations here. In my colleagues' comments, I don't believe that those comments refer to all 3. So I wonder what we need to do to sever these 3 recommendations that I had grouped together in the motion.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. The motion on the floor has grouped the recommendations together. And so Council can vote to separate the motions, and then we'll work through those. They don't need to be moved and seconded each time. You can just vote because you already have a mover and seconder.
Okay, I think the two kind of go together, but it's the accessible parking one. I just don't want to need to vote against accessible parking if that's not the deal breaker for you, and it doesn't sound like it is. So I'd move that we sever the the third to be debated, to be considered separately. It doesn't, that doesn't need to be do we need to vote on that, or just?
I believe you need to move and second and vote on separating them, and then you don't
So
need to move.
I
and
will
second.
I will move that we separate out the third bat. Second by Councillor Hamilton. I think I've explained why, so I'll just call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? You're opposed to severing it? Okay, thank you. Now we're back to the first two that's is where I'd like to. So I believe, Councillor Penning, I did this in response to your comments, so I believe I'm going to count that as your opportunity to speak to this portion of the motion. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak to it? Go ahead, Councillor French.
Thank you, Mayor Herford. And in the time that has passed since this committee of the whole, unlike my colleague, I feel that this is taking us in a direction that I'm comfortable with. And then having said that, I acknowledge my colleague for doing this. This is exactly what this process is designed to do, to give us another look at something after we've had a chance over the course of usually 7 days to get feedback from our community and hear from our constituents. So I support that we're doing this and we're having this conversation. We'll be voting in favor of the current motion.
Thank you, Councillor Stoner. And then
Thank you, through the chair. To not fully rehash our debate that happened at committee of the whole, I do appreciate my council colleague for raising this. I've also been mulling it over since our discussion a few weeks ago, especially on the cost benefit opportunities, given what our original scope and intention had been under paid parking, and receiving further correspondence from community around ongoing challenges with downtown parking, parking at Sea and Sky, and those are not being addressed in what we have presented here. And so I still find that disappointing. And then I do wonder the value of what we have put forward. Unlike my colleague, I also land on the side of, I do think it's still worthwhile giving this a shot at Darrell Bay. And I think that it's a fairly low cost, low staff capacity effort, given that it'll be a third party who will be operating it. And then there'll be revenue sharing as a result. And so I'm happy with where we have landed, despite still being disappointed with the change in scope. Thank you.
thank you, Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks very much. So, like Councillor Pettingill, I'm also disappointed by that this isn't moving paid parking as fast as I had hoped in as extensive a way as I had hoped within our community. I think that accepting that we need to that parking costs money. It costs money to park your car, whether you're parking it on your property or district property, and we need to recognize that as drivers in order to really ensure that the community is affordable as we move forward. So my only hesitation is that it's delaying the starting of more extensive paid parking, but I do see staff's concerns, and I'm happy to move forward with what we can at Darrell Bay.
Thank you. Other comments? If I remember correctly, I did my best to express my sentiments on the day, where we have, even in earlier comments today or earlier discussions today, we heard about, listening to the community and what we do when we hear the community. And I think that I'm still challenged by this, where for a long time we've heard from the community that there are challenges, and we've brought forward some ways to address those challenges. And we've heard as strong a feedback about, well, don't do something to address the challenges, which is really quite frustrating. But I think that this is as far forward as our community is willing to go at this point in time. And it is a step that positions the community overall to have a more informed discussion on this in 2027. armed with the information and the learnings of this pilot project, while addressing a bit of a gap, I think, right now, where we have a private operator in the Sea to Sky Gondola that manages their parking demand by charging for it in the peak season, and we're providing overflow parking for free and leaving some cash on the table there. So I think this makes some sense, and my reluctance is to on this at any point was that I'd hoped we could go further faster, but the community has told us quite clearly they're not ready for that, and I'm taking that on board in my support of this step at this point. So I'll call the question then. All in favor? And oppose? Councillor Pettingill opposes. Motion carries. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Pettingill.
I was going to move the next, speak to it if I can.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'll second that for you. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Or I think it's already been moved and seconded. So anyways, either way, go ahead.
Okay.
You can speak.
I appreciate my colleagues severing these. I was focused on the piece that I had developed discomfort for. This piece I very strongly support. I think there's no reason why we can't look at our accessible parking downtown and what those ratios are. I think that's important to do now. And so strongly support this piece of the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking of support of the motion, and I'd like to thank my colleague, Councillor Stoner, for bringing this, advancing this piece of work as part of that discussion. So happy to continue to support this going forward. And I will call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. We had no business arising from the minutes. Notice of motion, council. Seeing none, I'll go to open question period. Clarification related to agenda items by anybody in the audience is welcome to step forward and ask a question. Seeing none, I'll move. We have no council or staff. No. So council or staff announcements. Councillor French.
Mayor Herford, just wanted to remind council and the community that tomorrow is a very exciting day because the pool at Brennan Park is scheduled to reopen tomorrow. So just a reminder, the pool is back in action.
Thank you for that. That is absolutely front of mind. I'm going to go Councillor Greenlaw. I'll come back to Councillor Anderson.
Thanks. I just wanted to say a couple things. I wanted to point out that yesterday was Transgendered Visibility Day. And I wanted to thank the good people at Pearl Space for putting on an event. And also, I was speaking to some trans people yesterday and just, they're scared. Women are scared. Trans people are scared because there's a lot of stuff being said that is quite frightening. And one of the people yesterday shared that between them and their partner, 3 out of 4 of their parents had disowned them for being trans. So just continuing that conversation of recognizing that we are not all equal in this society and that some of us need more protection and more protection and allyship than others. I also wanted to point out that it is now Earth Month and also Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And no big deal, but I have something that's going to save the town. It involves a demonstration. Wait for it. It's not actually going to save the town. Prepare for profanities. Pickleball. Okay. Regular pickleball ball. I have very limited athletic skills. Wait for it. Silent pickleball ball. My mother-in-law discovered this. Hopefully this can be used in our community and maybe bring down some rage levels. I was very excited about this. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, who wants to follow that? Oh, Councillor Anderson, you have to follow the...
Well, I can follow along on the theme of amateur sport. This upcoming Saturday and Sunday, April 12th and 13th is Squamish Soccer Fest. It is a 50-year plus and long-standing successful Squamish tradition. This year, there will be 87 teams participating from all over the southern half of British Columbia, I'm sure. Every hotel and campground is absolutely jam-packed full, and you will witness parking mayhem all the way up Centennial Way up to, well, as far as you can go, and in every direction from Centennial Fields. And as you will attend, and it's great fun, it's men and women, boys and girls of all ages, and the volunteers behind the scene. Consider what they're involved in managing, delivering, and coping with this huge scale amateur sport festival. Do attend. Saturday, Sunday, April 12th and 13th, Squamish Soccer Fest.
Thank you. Any other updates? Okay, so I think last meeting I declined to, I said I'd do an update at this meeting. So I'm going to take us back a little ways. It's been a really busy time. I guess going forward, we'll go back to mid-March. I was able to attend the LGLA, which is Local Government Leadership Academy, which is an organization that the province funds to continue education of elected leaders. And it was full of great sessions, including one that had former Mayor Karen Elliott on the panel, discussing all sorts of the intricacies of the things where elected officials are the audience of how to go about our work. So I really appreciated my time there with learning and with my colleagues from around the province as we're all trying to figure out, how to solve the problems in our community and how to harness the capacities of our organizations to do that. Following on from that, I guess the next piece would likely be the amongst all the things is at the end of March, on the 21st, there was a AGM and conference for the British Columbia Snowmobile Federation here in Squamish, and I was able to attend with them for some remarks at their opening and join them for a couple sessions. And it was their 60th anniversary, which I thought was quite remarkable. And there were snowmobile clubs from all over British Columbia there to learn and to from each other and to obviously to advocate, of course, for their initiatives. But it was great to see our local snowmobile clubs there and presenting on their initiatives, which do really are very impactful to enhance the safety of our backcountry around the community. And just great to see so many dedicated volunteers working on to better the sport that they're that drives them, I guess. So that was it was very educational for me. I wasn't aware of some of the initiatives that were underway, even locally. And then what else do I want to get in here? That afternoon we had the announcement of the transit funding through the federal government for the sort of the capital investment there. That was later that day, and we'll call it there. There's probably all sorts of other pieces, but I think those are kind of the big pieces since I last had an update. And I will go. Is there anyone else that wanted to share? Oh, Councillor Stoner. Sorry, of course. Go ahead.
That's all right. Thanks. You bought me some time because I think I had some technology issues, but I think I'm back. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay. I just wanted to share, sorry I can't be with you in person this evening. I am in Victoria wearing my Union of BC Municipalities hat. This time of year is our annual advocacy days where on behalf of all local governments across the province, we descend on Victoria and we have a series of meetings with MLAs across all parties in order to advance the understanding of what UBCM does, as well as our core priorities for local government membership. So over the course of 1.5 days, we'll have 30 meetings with about 34 MLAs. And our core priorities this year will not be a surprise to anybody around this table or across local government, but it's advocating for increased infrastructure spending, specifically stimulus investment that would follow the allocation model of the Canada Community Building Fund. Increased investments in affordable housing, improvements to BC housing operations, and a request for an annual percentage of the provincial property transfer tax to come to local governments to support our efforts in affordable housing, as well as raising ongoing concerns around the downloading of emergency healthcare, specifically around healthcare costs, pre-hospital healthcare costs on RCMP and fire, as we continue to respond to mental health addictions and homeless issues in our community. So I just wanted council, staff, our community, and anybody else who might be listening to know that that's the work that's going on in Victoria on behalf of UBCM. Thanks.
Thank you for that. If there's no other updates, we'll move on. We don't have any motion to close or any council staff in-camera announcements. So I will go to, yes, Councillor Hamilton, are you interested in a motion?
A motion to terminate.
Seconded by Councillor Stoner. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. And thank you for joining us, Councillor Stoner. I know it's complicating logistics, so keep up the good work over there.
Thanks, everybody. Nice to see you.